Boy, my least favorite political person to talk to deal with these days are the NIMBY people, the not in my backyard folks. Maybe it's because they're like what they do is so in the gray area. It's like it's one of those things where I understand how you get there. I do. And as a result, like I can't be as freely angry at them as I can be with like the fascists. Like we can just agree. I could just agree with a fascist at least on one thing, which is that we hate each other. And there's something freeing in that. But the NIMBY folks, boy, it's always a slog. Well, here's a little bit about how we can deal with that. Let's talk about getting affordable housing for everybody. And once again, I got to thank our friends in Canada for bringing us these hot facts. Facts. I'm going to stick with facts. Nope. That's CNN still. Well, it's going to be an awkward recording, y'all. But that's okay. Hey, you know what? If you keep your head up, sometimes you get a miracle. All right, here we go.
If there's anything we find encouraging about the future of housing affordability, it's that the Yes in My Backyard pro-housing movement crosses political and ideological lines.
Boom.
This week, 3 bills making big changes in how Montana cities handle zoning passed through the House with broad margins and bipartisan support.
Unfortunately, the Not in My Backyard activists who oppose housing and neighborhood change are also pretty diverse politically.
I have seen a city of renters, and it's terrible.
My constituents did not elect me to line the pockets of developers, to gut zoning regulations, and ignore the wishes of our cities and towns.
In this video, we're going to cover pro-housing and anti-housing positions from 4 different political perspectives.
The environmentalist case for NIMBYism is that denser development is just better for the environment. It sounds counterintuitive given the trope of cities as concrete jungles, but building more compactly and building up are very effective strategies for paving over less forests, farmland, and otherwise ecologically valuable land. If Brooklyn had the density of Staten Island, it would take up.
I threw myself there a little bit by not having this loaded up. My bad. First of all, that was Juan Mendez. He's a Democrat. That is the point they were making, is that the NIMBYism, it reaches across political aisles, the aisle, whatever. What I wanted to say to y'all going into this, which I will now say, is that imagine for a moment you're running for city council. Or imagine for a moment you're pitching affordable housing to your city council. Take a look at your community. Decide generally what they are. Are they leaning more towards one style or the other? Are they Austin or are they Houston? There's a difference. Understand your crowd and play to them. Don't lie to them. Even if they don't know how you're lying, they can smell a lie. Just assume that it is so. Don't lie to them. But be a salesperson about it, you know? Tell whatever is true of these things, of this presentation you're about to hear on how, essentially, how to pitch affordable housing to different folks. How to get rid of NIMBYism. And pitch it that way. So I ask you only to listen to this while at the same time imagining that you personally, are going to do this at a city council meeting, say.
Up almost 5 times more land than it currently does. Letting people live closer to things makes walking, cycling, and transit more practical, allowing them to leave cars for trips where they're really needed. Motor vehicles spew all sorts of things into the air that give people cancer, respiratory diseases, and other health problems, on top of contributing to climate change. One study from California found that urban infill development, allowing more homes where people already live, is one of the best strategies to decrease greenhouse gas emissions.
Just a heads up, obviously, this is the pitch to progressives, the kind of thing you would do. Okay.
Environmentalism gets housing wrong when it takes an extremely local perspective and ignores the bigger picture. Ann Arbor, Michigan recently rezoned a commercial corridor notable for its oceanic parking lots to allow high-density housing with the goal of creating a more downtown-style environment that's more pedestrian-friendly and less car-centric. One councilor opposed the changes. The craze to fill our city with new residents overlooks the fact that every person we bring here brings their carbon footprint. This makes no sense. Carbon doesn't get counted according to city boundaries, and people moving to a higher density, less car-centric neighborhood are going to have a lower carbon lifestyle on average. Another environmentalism hazard is focusing too much on aesthetics and seeing green things, which can lead someone to think that the monoculture, manicured lawns of suburbia are the pinnacle of environmentalism. Even more urban environmentalists are not immune to prioritizing aesthetics over function. A former city councilor in Ottawa recently declared that no building should be higher than the highest tree, which he declared to be 6 stories.
The conservative case for YIMBYism is that dense, mixed-use neighborhoods are just the traditional way that cities and towns were built, for as long as humans.
Now, just a minute here. You might be thinking, wait a minute. They're trying to appeal to conservative populism while pitching affordable housing? Yes. It can be done. Remember, I'm encouraging y'all to run, even if you're in a bright red district, even if your town is bright red. Run. Run for office. Or at least try to convince your city council to do something you would like. You can still pitch to these folks. You can even pitch to populists amongst these folks. Here is how. I won't waste your time rephrasing something I thought they phrased great the first time. But understand that all the ugly stuff we've been seeing of late, number one, doesn't need to does not represent the entirety of, let's say, I hesitate to say conservative because Republicans are hardly conservative anymore, but that conservative populism. And number two, if we don't acknowledge other elements of the things these people like, then that will be all they are. Because they will be getting advertisement for their worst ideas from us if all we ever try to appeal to is either the people that hate their worst ideas, or we just pretend like they have no populism. In which case, then we're just Democrats running in the center by agreeing to give giant breaks to gianter businesses. So yes, let's look at the populist conservative pitch for denser housing.
Settlements existed until the radical suburban experiment of top-down planning and one-size-fits-all approaches to housing. Neighborhoods built before modern zoning were based on organic growth according to the needs of individuals and households. So, for example, if your retired parents are getting older, you can build a secondary suite in your backyard for them. This is not legal on most land in most cities under modern zoning. Taller apartment buildings might or might not be for you, but they're only financially viable in a city where there's demand and need for them. Traditional mixed-use main streets are more conducive to smaller and more local businesses, and more traditional compact urban forms allow children more independence and physical activity without needing to be driven everywhere.
Conservatism gets housing and density wrong when it turns exclusionary. Modern housing regulations almost always prioritize larger homes that take more land and cost more money. And that's appealing to a lot of people as a method of government-enforced economic segregation. Why do we want a bunch of poor people in Alexandria anyway? No one does except city council, so they can tax the property and live their progressive dream of turning us into a mini San Francisco. This exclusionary instinct often targets renters.
And I've seen cities of renters, and it's ugly. It's unkept. It's noisy. Strangers, schools, issues. The whole thing sounds to me as if it is absurd. It sounds like a socialist kind of idea, and I'm not a name caller. If I sound like a NIMBY, too bad, because I care about me, my neighbors, my friends, and my cities. Single-family homes are going to be doomed. And when that happens, part of the spine of a city becomes doomed.
The progressive case for NIMBYism is that rules about what kind of housing is allowed and where fundamentally reinforce economic inequality. Through zoning.
Okay. Just want to touch on that the last segment for a second. Mars Falcon, conservatism consists of exactly one proposition, to wit, there must be in-groups from who the law protects but does not bind, alongside out-groups from who the law binds but does not protect. Quoting Frank Wilhoit. I hope I said that correctly. First of all, wow, good poll. Second, I'm going to steal it. Thank you. Second of all, I think whatever conservatism is in reality, what it is in theory, is a resistance to change. So if you want to appeal to that mentality, you just approach it, and again, do so honestly, but approach it from the aesthetics of it. Like, do you really want these cookie cutter neighborhoods? Do you really want these economically inefficient cities? Do you really want the government telling, if you're appealing to small government types, do you really want the government restricting what you can do with a piece of property that you bought with legal tender? These are things you can say that are absolutely in line with having more affordable housing available. There's also a huge difference between the conservative voter and the conservative politician. That Frank Wilhoit quote, I would pin largely on the politician and say that the voter is just the person who is, they're giving their pitch to. That's really all politicians are doing. They're giving their best pitch for the things they think ought to be done. And in the case of the modern conservative politician, particularly in the United States, and I'm so sorry to say it, Canada as well, they're really good at doing pitches, but unfortunately they have no interest whatsoever in helping anybody else other than themselves.
You are effectively banned from building anything other than a mansion in Toronto's Bridle Path neighborhood. Some recent citywide reforms make it a little better, but you still can't build apartments. Rich people literally use the power of the government to ban anyone else from living in their neighborhoods. Mansion zoning is the most egregious case, but most cities reserve most land for only single-family detached homes, the most expensive type of housing, limiting apartment buildings, both tall and short, to small sections of the city, often near highways or arterial roads. Treating denser housing as a nuisance that has to be carefully managed leads to housing scarcity, raising prices and putting power in the hands of landlords and home sellers. Additionally, our broken housing system doesn't just hinder private development. Talk to anyone who builds nonprofit or affordable housing, and they'll tell you that low-density zoning, parking requirements, and community opposition are major barriers in their housing work.
A new development in Orleans that includes affordable housing units will be delayed because of a parking issue.
Some suggesting, though, it's not really about parking, it's about keeping affordable housing out of the neighborhood.
Oh, no, I'm not against affordable housing at all. It's just, I think there's other places that would probably be a little bit better.
Progressivism gets housing wrong when it rejects incremental progress, in favor of idealism that perpetuates the status quo. The Arizona Senate Democrats spoke out against state-level housing reforms by saying,
Can you guess? Can you guess which Arizona Senate Democrat that was?
That
Housing
He's back.
plans that upend our cities and towns' local control is a non-starter. Our motto cannot be that a $300,000 house is cheaper than a $500,000 house.
But that's a really big improvement that would make stable housing accessible for hundreds of thousands more families in Arizona. Perversely, this way of thinking gets even more appealing the more expensive your city is. Who wants to argue that an 8-plex with units starting at $900,000 is the solution to housing affordability? Well, that actually would have been a step in the right direction in West Vancouver. Average home price $3 million, where that project was rejected, with one councillor complaining that the starting price is still out of reach for many. Another progressive mistake is thinking that supporting nonprofit housing development should be paired with obstructing for-profit housing construction. There's a pervasive idea that we can just reject market-rate housing because the private market is fundamentally incapable of serving regular people, but that's plainly not true. A townhouse in Edmonton, a fast-growing city with high incomes, averages $260,000, with condos averaging $195,000. To be clear, this does not solve every housing problem or eliminate homelessness.
I do want to say, obviously, if you want to know obviously the one I'm going to object to most is the one that gives the pitch and the criticism to the progressive side. You know, a $500,000 house and $1 million house are absolutely no different to me whatsoever. I have the same ability to purchase either, and so does everybody else I have ever worked alongside. However, they're not wrong. You get houses in an area to be made a little more practically, a little more humble, and you get 2 houses out of a chunk of land instead of 1, and suddenly they're being sold for $500 when they were selling for $1 million. That makes it easier for the next step, where there's houses built somewhere near there that go for $300, and the next step where so on and so on. And a couple miles away, your old pal Jake can afford a nice, humble shack. But still, they're not wrong, is all I want to say. They're just, you gotta appreciate that they are talking about an extraordinarily long-term plan for affordable housing. But again, they're not wrong. We being progressives here, as a voting bloc and as a bunch of candidates, do tend to reject the less bad in pursuit of the great. And I don't think that's always the wrong instinct, but I do think we should be more open to taking steps in the right direction, so long as that we ensure that isn't the end of the story or the fight.
But it's fundamentally more functional for middle and even lower income households, compared to high-cost cities where housing has gone completely off the rails.
The libertarian case for NIMBYism is that zoning and land use regulations are some of the most blatant infringements on freedom and property rights in North America. Why does your city government get to dictate how big your lawn is, or prevent you from redeveloping your property into a multiplex or apartment building? What's worse, the economic research is clear that these burdensome land use regulations hinder economic growth by making jobs.
Side note, by God, this is a good channel. This is useful as strategy, I think.
Job markets less efficient.
We do become more productive when we are surrounded by a maelstrom of economic activity. People for us to work with, to learn from, to sell to buy from.
Despite their inclusive rhetoric, high-opportunity cities like New York and San Francisco effectively exclude large classes of people from living there through their dysfunctional housing markets. Liberalizing land use regulations might be one of the best policies out there to promote economic mobility.
I know of no pathway out of poverty into prosperity that does not run through city streets.
Allowing more compact development patterns is also good for city finances. Forcibly spreading people out inflates cities' infrastructure liabilities.
Libertarianism or free market conservatism gets housing wrong when it prioritizes local control rather than freedom. Colorado House Republicans oppose state-level housing reforms to legalize more housing across Colorado, saying that the attack on local control goes against the principles of small government libertarianism, even though the local governments are the ones enacting onerous regulations, and the state government was trying to legalize more housing.
A newly rolled out affordable housing legislation would allow denser development throughout Colorado's biggest cities. Opponents of the legislation, including the Colorado Municipal League, say it steamrolls local control and home rule.
The Republican acting mayor of Greenwood Village, Colorado, dismissed these state-level reforms as a mandate denying people the right to have a say over who their neighbors are. A scholar from a free enterprise think tank characterized California's state-level efforts to override local control and legalize more housing construction as Soviet-era central planning.
Okay. Damn it. Libertarians, man, they're a hoot. I just want to say you can really see a lot about how politicians function with those arguments. Like, if you stop and think about what a libertarian is supposed to be, or even what conservative small government types are supposed to be, look at how that one fellow was twisting those words. What he was saying, it's denying people the right to have a say in who their neighbors are. The whole idea is it's, according to what I was told conservatives gave a damn about. It's supposed to be that nobody has a say in what you do. Or at least libertarians, that's supposed to be their belief. Nobody gets to bother you. You get to go do your own thing. That's the way they work. So your neighbors, for example, don't have a say in what property you can buy and what you can do with it. That's the libertarian way. It's supposed to be. Anyway. But no. This guy doesn't want poors in his area. So he says, can't deny people the right to say who their neighbors will be. Jackass.
There's also a sentiment in many libertarian circles associating cars with freedom, leading some otherwise libertarian-minded people to support rules that mandate and micromanage how much parking needs to be included in new buildings, instead of leaving it up to demand and normal market forces to decide. Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Special thanks to our supporters on Patreon.
Oh, they're funking out there. Yeah. What can you do about it? Pretty straightforward. Go to your, if you want to talk specific, go to your city council. Go to their public sessions. You can thank Obama for this. They're required to have public sessions and propose affordable housing initiatives. I know I bust Obama's chops all the time. I give him one. Consider running for a seat on your city council. You want to have the ability to have at least one person on your city council who always votes the way you think they ought to vote? That can be you. It's that simple. Get all your friends to run as well. Y'all can literally run that city. It's not terribly difficult. In fact, you and all your if you're in a small enough town and you and all your friends decide to run, just take over your city council. You can vote for multiple people on the city council. So you convince somebody to vote for you. You're also probably convincing them to vote for your pal. These are elections which are generally won by a couple of hundred votes. If you're talking like town council, that sort of thing. That's what we're talking about. You could literally take over your town and run it however you feel is best. But that's a lot of work. And I don't want to only pitch you things that are going to be freaking exhausting. You can also just go to your city council's public sessions and propose affordable housing initiatives. But broadly, For this, you can do this, and for all arguments, understand how to pitch these things to the crowd you're talking to. Do not lie. Don't lie about what it is, but do sell. Focus on the true arguments that will sway your crowd, your target audience. There's a reason I tend to select the clips that I do. It's because your old pal Jake is convinced he's got straight fire suggestions. And I'm not interested in telling people who aren't terribly fond of the Jews how to get things done. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't have the ability to talk to people outside of our preferred political sphere. And if what we are doing is right and correct and true as we say it is, then it really should be good for everybody. And you really should be able to make a case to most folks for why it's good for them. So, know your audience, pitch to them correctly, and strongly consider running for city council. As always, links are in the description, but in this one, it's just your home city council. Take it over. Or pitch to them.